Hi guys, so the topic we are going to see now is plain CSS. It is going to be a continuation for the last video HTML. I'm pretty sure you guys follow along with that cheat sheet approach. So we are going to try the same thing now. It's not like we are going to right away get into a project and try to convert a design PST into a web page. So instead what we'll be doing right now is we'll just go along all those important CSS properties and we'll create a cheat sheet with it, and maybe it will serve as a reference for you guys. Yeah, without any further ado, let's get started. Hey guys, so what is CSS? Cascading Style Sheet, so that's what it stands for. But what exactly does it mean? I'll say like there are HTML elements and you're gonna tinker around with various properties, like you're gonna change the color, you're gonna move things back and forth. You do all sort of stuffs. So anything that you think about creative work, so it comes under CSS, because there is not much of a coding part in it. So what is exactly the workflow when it comes to web development? What happens is initially a designer designs a web page and he sends it to client for approval, and what happens is he'll just fine tune it, he'll say some corrections, so and so, change this color, do that, do this, and finally it comes to the integration team. That's where he does all the HTML works. He loads image assets and he does all the coloring work and everything that is related to the web page. And finally what happens is he'll try to match the design that he was given. So that's the exact workflow. So are they using CSS right now? Like it is 2019 already, so of course there are some updates on it. Like people are using something like SCSS and less. So this is where developers lean towards nowadays. That's because it is used in most popular frameworks like React, Angular. So, and also it comes with a lot of additional features and elegant ways to fine tune things that are done using CSS. So of course the question arises, why not right away learn SCSS or less? I'll say the first thing that you need to do is get yourself familiarized with all those properties in CSS, and then what you could do is you can get to know about SCSS or less. And in this project we are not gonna look into complete design to web page project. That is because I don't want you guys missing some important properties. Next time I'm pretty sure we'll do a project from scratch and it is going to be a responsive website. So for now let's create a cheat sheet. What I'll do is I'll just create a basic HTML template. I'll name it as like CSS. Okay, yeah, okay, I'll name it as CSS cheat sheet .html, and we'll give it a basic document, and right away we'll create an element. Okay, so I'll just open it with a live server. Yeah, here you see. So first, how is a maybe I'll just hide this thing, this covering up a lot of space. Yeah, so first, how is CSS done? There are usually three types in it. One is inline CSS, and the next thing is internal CSS. Oh, okay. And the last thing is external CSS. So first, coming to internal CSS, inline CSS, what happens is they'll just put a style tag here and give some property like color red, something like that. And what happens is it right away reflects here. But it is usually not preferred, and it is not the right way to do. So just don't try to follow this what happened? Okay, so just don't try to follow this thing. And so what is internal CSS? If you have looked into last HTML video, you might have known it already. You just give a style tag here and you select the actual h1 tag. So if I'm going to do h1 and say color this blue, what happens is it does not reflect. The reason is it is a top-down approach, and initially this color gets applied and it is replaced by red. And even there is another thing, like you put some exclamation mark and mark it as important. What happens is this is like a workaround hack. If you don't know if the proper style you have applied is coming right here, usually what they do is they'll just put it as important and it will anyway show up here. So don't try to use any of these hacks. The best method is to go for external CSS. So what are the disadvantages of this above two methods? The first thing is scalability. Yeah, so scalability is a big issue, because as the app grows, what happens is you can't keep on writing another property like font size 20 pixel, and you can't keep on adding up properties. Of course it is going to look a bit weird, because you won't even recognize a lot of things here. And usually mixing up HTML and CSS is not a good practice. It's best always to keep the HTML file separate and CSS file separate and the JavaScript part separate. So that's how it is done. The next thing is readability. Say for instance some other developer is going to look into your work and he is going to make some corrections. What happens if he couldn't even find where you have written all the code and it is too congested? Like usually they'll give some term like code spaghetti for this. You write CSS on top of another CSS and it keeps on piling up at a point you won't know where the style is coming from. So we don't want that to happen. And the last issue is, I'll say, you can't reuse it. So that is a major drawback. Usually when you write code, it is better to have it reusable in many ways. So that's what I'd suggest. So this puts us to a point where we are supposed to use external CSS, and that is a good practice. So I'll just comment it out for you guys. So I'll just comment this also. We'll create another tag. I'll just comment this one. We don't want it interfering with any of other styles. Let's just create a h2 tag and we'll say like hello world, and we'll create a paragraph with some lorem ipsum content. Okay, so coming to the next part, what we'll do is we'll just create an external CSS. Usually it comes under a CSS folder, and they create something like style.css or global.css something. And what they do is they'll just select that h1 attribute and give some color like green maybe. Okay, I'm making a lot of typos. Yeah, you should not be seeing any change from here, because okay, there is actually a lot of mistakes here. Initially we are selecting the h2 tag and still you won't be seeing. The reason is because the HTML file doesn't know that such a CSS file exists. So what we are supposed to do is, there is something called as link attribute. So you just link that file to this HTML file. So it lies in CSS folder, and once you save it, you should be seeing the difference. Okay, so actually there are a lot of colors. The one that we wrote now is just like basic colors. So we usually don't use this anymore. And there is something called HTML5 color codes. So what's that? Once you type color, and I'm gonna start with some name. You see these things, right? Tan, teal, thistle. We have even tomato, Turkish. Okay, so all these are HTML5 color names. So usually there are a lot of things like white smoke, I guess. Yeah, so you can choose any of it. And the next method is usually what they do is they go for RGB values. So that's usually like they define the intensity of red, green and blue. They mark it as RGB, and they give some intensity like 255 and 22, maybe 100. I don't know what that color is going to be. Okay, so once you save that, it somewhat looks like red. And the last method is actually hexadecimal colors. So hexadecimal colors are usually like it starts with a hash, and usually there's some color code like 2F 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 something. And what happens is it turns into, okay, it's usually black, I guess. There are some other color codes. Yeah, as you could see, when you move here, you will be seeing a different hexadecimal value. So you could use one among it. Yeah, that's how it works. I think, yeah, now you could see this. Okay, so this is the last way of showing how a color works. Now what we'll do is we'll get into something called font. So we have p tag. We'll just try to change the font using a property called font family, and you will be seeing a bunch of fonts here. Let's just choose this Apple system. Okay, what happens is you will right away notice a difference. What is all these fonts doing here? The reason is like the rest of the fonts are fallback fonts. Once it couldn't find any of the prior font, it will use the fallback font. So that's how it works. And the next property is going to be font size. Actually, you could see a bunch of properties here, so you could freely try it out. I'll just show you some basic properties for now. We'll just mark it as like 12 pixels. Yeah, and there is another property like font weight, ranging from lowest value to higher. Like if you're gonna give a lower value, it is going to be so thin. You can even write something like bold, and it is going to show up bold. As you could see, it is very closely packed. So what we can do is we can increase the line height, and we could say something like it is so many, what do you say, measurement values. There are usually pixels, mm, centimeter, em, vw, vh, rem. All these are different measurement properties. So usually they'll opt for pixels. So once we get into a responsive site building, I'll just tell you what the important measurement properties are. For now, we'll just use pixels, or why don't we give a try to em. So once you do this, you will be seeing a line height difference. Yeah, that's mostly about font, I guess. Now what we'll do is we'll just wrap this into a container, because usually in websites you won't be seeing the content too much inclined towards either sides. So what we'll do is we'll create a div tag, and we'll target it with something called as class. So what is class exactly? When you're going to reuse something, like if you're gonna reuse this exact style again, you can use something like a class. But say if you're going to have something unique, for instance, if you're going to have a navigation bar in the top, and it is going to carry an ID called main nav bar, so you could use ID for that. Right now we'll just use the class, I'll just wrap this into the container. You won't be seeing actually any difference. That is because we didn't write any styles to it. I'll just target the class. Usually for class we are supposed to include a dot in front of it to target it, and we'll say like width 960 pixels. So what happens is it just overflows. You will be seeing that it exactly stops at 960 pixels. So we don't want this behavior, we want it to be centered. So what we'll do is we'll give margin auto. So now you could see that it is evenly spaced, but what happens if the site gets a bit like the device gets a bit low? Say for instance at this height even you have this overflow X scroll bar. We don't want this behavior. So usually what we do is we give something like percentage. So we want it to fit 80% of the device width. So once we give that, you will be seeing that it is responsive. You can even check it out. Yeah. So that's how responsive sites work. I'll just mark it as responsive. Yeah. So now what we'll do is, as you could see, the wordings are too uneven. Usually we will be using something like justify in Word document. Similar thing is available in CSS as well. Could just point out text align and you could select justify, and you will be seeing that every content is justified to its end. Yeah, that's most of the container properties. Actually, you might have heard something like bootstrap. So usually bootstrap is something where developers have already wrote predefined CSS, and it already contains all this container and all the classes. So if you take a look into it, so this is the container class. All you have to do is you have to include this CSS into your HTML, just like we added our main style.css, and of course you will come up with a preloaded classes. Right away you could use this class inside and it will reflect to it immediately. So the reason why we are not using bootstrap is because usually these things are used in internal applications. Like say for instance you are building a inventory management application or an industrial grade tracking something like a web application, then I'll say you can right away go into bootstrap and use the predefined styles. But when it comes to client requirements, what happens is usually they have unique requirements, and if you are going to use bootstrap, I'll say it is going to be a double work for you. The reason is it will come with preloaded styles, and once you use bootstrap it won't look much of a unique feel. So all you have to do is you should reset it over again and you should write code over it. So usually they don't prefer it. That's the reason bootstrap is not used relevantly. Next what we'll do is we'll look into something called box model. So what is box model exactly? I'll say we'll just wrap this entire section into another div and we'll name it as post. So the reason for creating multiple classes you will just see in a minute. It is like reusing the class in multiple places of requirement. So we'll just target that post and we'll give it a border of 1 pixel, solid, black. So now you should be seeing a border. Actually, what we can also give something like center line dotted, something like that. Yeah, so you should be seeing dotted lines around, and we'll just give it a padding so that it will look good. And also some top margin of 40 pixels. Yeah, so now you should be having a pretty decent content area. So what happens is, say for instance you are going to create another post. All you have to do is you create a div and you give it some tag elements, and you load some lorem ipsum content, and if you save that you will be seeing that. But in order to replicate this same style, all you have to do is you don't have to redo all the work. You just have to give it a class of post, so it instantly takes over that class and reflects all the CSS properties. So that is a major advantage of using class. And also, what is box model? Once you select a element, you could see that we have something like a box here. So this is the element, and it is the padding around it, and the border and the margin. So this is on the whole called as box model. It defines how a element is placed in your HTML document, and it is usually used to see the padding and margin for all the contents. Now what we'll do is, in earlier post I just said that usually they'll use a unordered list to create a navigation bar. So we'll just right away try to create a navigation bar right now. So we saw something like a nav tag and an unordered list and LA tags. So LA tags usually comes with something called profile, and about us, contact us. Yeah, so for those who didn't understand what all these tag elements are, I suggest you that you have to take a look into the HTML priorly before watching the CSS course. So once you see that, you will be aware of what all these tag elements are. For now, what we'll do is we'll just create a navigation bar out of it. As you see, this doesn't look much like a navigation bar. So what we'll do is we'll just target the nav element, and we'll give it something like position. Before that, we'll just try to use margin initially, because what happens is, say for instance I'm going to give a background color of something like maybe blue. Yeah, that will look too dark. Maybe something like lighter color. Yeah, this should do. So once you give this, you will be seeing a margin and padding around it. So the reason is because there is something called user agent style sheet. It gets pre-applied. So usually what a developer does is he'll just do a reset before starting everything. What happens is he'll just create something called reset. It is targeting the entire document, and it sets the margin and padding to 0. So once he does that, it should have reflected. Okay, the reset should be, yeah. So now you will be able to see that the margin and padding is gone. So it is actually a good thing to start from scratch, but others might differ. It's completely up to your perspective. What I would say is there is no right way to do anything in CSS. Everything is actually creativity based, so you can do it as you wish, but what I would say is try to follow some principle. There is something called dry principle, What does it mean is, do not repeat yourself. Now what it stands for is, whatever CSS or whatever coding you may write, just make sure that you don't keep on repeating yourself, you don't keep on writing some junk codes, and it takes up a lot of memory, or like it reduces performance drastically. Just see to that, then I'll say you're doing a pretty good job yourself. So you don't need to follow anyone stating that this is the right way of doing CSS or anything. You can just do as you wish. Just make sure you do not repeat yourself. So now coming to the navigation, what we'll do is we'll give it a display type of flex. So once you give that, you won't be seeing much of a difference. We'll target the unordered list and we'll mark it with list style. Usually it will be having some sort of disk to denote the bulleting. We'll just take it off. You can also use something called square and it will show up into a square, but since we are doing a navigation pane, I'm just going to remove it. And what we'll do is we can give a display flex to this as well. So once you give that, you will be seeing a drastic difference. Then what we could do is we'll just margin left to auto, so we could make it to go this side, and we'll target the LI elements and we'll just say like padding 10 pixels. Yeah, that should give a look and feel of a actual navigation pane. So usually there will be something like a branding, so it is missing here. I'll just give it as well. Usually branding comes in a attribute tag, sorry, a tag. I'll just give it as JS workbench. Of course we'll be given with all these hideous styles. We'll just take it right away. So just select the attribute tag and mark the text decoration to be none. So the underline will go right away, and we'll give it padding of 10 pixel and give it a color of maybe white. Okay, that's too dull. We'll just give it a black color. Yeah, so now you should be seeing a much of a difference. And also we could increase the font weight. Maybe we'll make it a bit bolder. So that looks like a branding. Now what we could do is we usually see something like a hand symbol while we hover over it, the content. We could just give it using cursor pointer, and the difference we see on hover is something called pseudo selector. So there is a property called hover, and once you use that, you can alter any of the properties in it. I'll just give it like color green. Yeah, so now once you hover it, okay, I'm actually hovering the entire navbar. So instead of that, what you're supposed to do is hovering over the LI element. Now you should be seeing a denotion. That looks like a pretty decent navbar. But usually what they do is, once the site gets a bit responsive, they'll just hide this entire content and they'll show something like a hamburger icon, and once you click it, it will drop into a menu and you will see all this menu here in a vertical fashion. So that is something for later videos, of course, while we do a responsive site. For now, what we'll do is we'll move to the next topic. So that is going to be none other than forms. So forms is going to look hideous by default. I'll just show you a demo right now. Say for instance, you're giving a Okay, didn't know. Okay, so we'll just use the same div. And we'll create a form inside of it. Let's just say we are creating different form groups. So since we are going to have multiple inputs, we'll create a class for it. What you write here is entirely up to you. You can even write it as something like ABCD, and of course it is going to work. But I would say that it is better to write something meaningful so that later on anyone could understand what exactly this class is doing. So that's what I would say. Let's just create a label. I'll mark it as first name. Okay, I'm having a lot of typos nowadays. And we'll have an input tag. Yeah, that should give a basic form. We'll just replicate this 2 more times. We can have something like last name. I keep on doing this. Okay, so we'll have something like a message. Of course, an input box is not gonna be sufficient, so we'll create a text area. Yeah, so you could see what I meant. Of course, this looks hideous. We are gonna target it with CSS properties. Before that, we'll just create a button and we'll mark it as submit. So how am I supposed to make this look a bit pretty? Okay, I think you guys are seeing the bottom of screen. What I'll do is I'll quickly create a div with margin 500 pixel. Sorry. Yeah, so now you should be seeing this. Yeah, how to target this? What we'll do is we'll open our style sheet. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to give the form a margin of 10 pixels, so you should separate it. Now we'll select the form group and we'll give it a padding of maybe 15 pixels. So now it should be separated. What I want is I want all these labels to be in separate line. For that we'll select the form group and the label and we'll mark it as display. We'll convert it into a block level element. So now it looks a bit okay. Still, if you type, you will be seeing a very congested space. You don't want that. So I'll just target the input element and we'll write some basic class like padding 10 pixel, and I want it to span over the entire area. So for that we'll use with 100%. Yeah, that should do the trick. Now you should be seeing a basic style. I guess that's most of it. As you can see, even though this is an input, you wouldn't have seen the padding or the width. That is because it is denoted as text area. So now it should reflect as well. Next we'll try to convert this button into a appealing look. We'll just first make it into a block level element. And we'll give it a margin auto. So now what will happen is it will come to center. Now we can give it a padding of maybe 10 pixels and a background color, something, yeah, this should do. I don't even know what that is. Now we'll just get rid of the annoying border. Yeah, that's all I guess. So you should be seeing something like this. Now what we'll do is, usually once a user goes near to it, it should look like a clickable field. So for that, we are going to do the same thing that we did for navigation. So we are going to give it a pseudo selector of hover, and we are going to change the background color to something more discreet, or something like teal. Yeah, and also we'll give it a cursor of pointer. So now once a user gets here, they should see that clickable field. Yeah, that's mostly like it, I guess. I guess we've covered most of the part. I thought to complete this video in, like, say for instance 30 minutes, but it is taking a bit long. We still have, I think, 2 more topics. Yeah, so the next topic that we are gonna see is, where does it end? Yeah, it ends here. So we'll create another tag. We'll give it another class of post, and we'll create a unordered list and a lot of list elements. Item 1, yeah, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, I wanna name it manually. 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, I don't know where it came from. Now you should be seeing this list items. Usually what they'll do is, they'll try to make it look like dynamic data in the form of a table. So we'll try to replicate the same thing. We'll just select the list items in the post, and we'll take the list style to none. Now you should be seeing that border gone, and we'll give it a, actually we'll give the list a bit of padding. Yeah, so now what we'll do is, we'll try to play around with something called pseudo selectors. So pseudo selectors is nothing but it takes into account of the dynamic values, and it tries to apply that style for that thing. Now since we have the li tags, what I'll do is, I'll target the first element in the li. So there is something called first child. I'll give it a color of maybe green. Yeah, of course you might have guessed it, we do have a last child. So all you have to do is change this to last, and you could give something like blue, and you should be seeing that reflect here. And we also have an nth child, so you can specify some number, and it should be giving you the property to that particular li element. Say for instance I want the 5th element to, you don't have to keep on giving something like color. You can choose any of the CSS properties. I'll give it a background color of maybe tomato. Yeah, now you should be seeing this. Also you have something called odd even. So what I'll do is, I'll just copy this entire thing, and instead of file I'll just give it as odd, and we'll give it a light gray or light blue. So now you should be seeing this styles applied to odd. Also you could give it as even, anything. So this is how pseudo selectors work. Now what we'll do is, the next topic will get into positions. It's hard to find where it starts and where it ends. Yeah. Okay, so I'll give it a class again. We'll give something like class. Sorry, actually I'm supposed to write it here. Class post. I'll also give it another class. Say for instance position. So it has nothing to do with the CSS that is already applied. I'm just adding another bit of CSS to say for instance change the existing properties. Now I'm going to target the position and I'm going to give it a height of say for instance 500 pixels. I think that's too large. We'll give it something like 250 pixels. Yeah. Now you should be seeing a box here. So what are we going to do with this box? We are going to learn about positioning the various elements. Say for instance we have a h1 element here and it says like hello. Now you could see it here, but what happens when you select that h1 element? I'm going to select the position and the h1 in it, and I'm going to position it absolutely. So I want it to be positioned from top for about 10 pixels. So you won't be seeing this. The reason is because it is actually there, but it is positioned from the top. So we don't want that to happen. The reason is because we want it to be positioned relative to this box. So what we are supposed to do is we are supposed to mark this box position to relative. So once you do that, you should be seeing the hello inside here. So we can position any element, any number of elements here. Say for instance I'm going there is a h2 tag and I'll mark it as by. I'll just replicate it here, and what we'll do is we'll target it and position it from right 5 pixels and from bottom maybe 10 pixels. Yeah, now you should be seeing that here. So this is how positioning works. Also you could color each and every element here. Say for instance you have a post here. What you could do is you could simply give it a color. If I could find it. Yeah, here it is. I'm going to give it a color. Yeah, first we'll give it a color of light gray. Yeah. Oh sorry, actually background color. So now you should be seeing the color in it. You can also use something called gradient, I guess. It will be background image and linear gradient. You would have seen PowerPoint presentations with some 2 colors with filling up the entire space in PPT presentations. So we could do the same thing here. I'll just use light gray. To start at 0% and white for about 100%. So now what happens is, okay, actually, okay, now you will be seeing gradient tinge, like it starts here and then ends here. You will be seeing a subtle difference. Also you can give parameters like a degree, maybe 45 degree. Now what should happen is you will be seeing it from sideways, so you could control all the parameters using this linear gradient. Yeah, now it looks a bit fine, I guess. Not entirely. Anyway, so now getting back to the topic, we can also load an image inside this. Say for instance we have Do we have an image? Yeah, we have a sample image from last tutorial. I'll just position it inside the box using something called background image, and we'll select it using the URL property. Since it is one level outside from the style CSS folder, we'll just get one path outside and we'll select that file. So now you should be seeing that file here. Okay, I think you can't see it properly. So what we can do for that is we can control the size. Yeah, it's at the last. And say for instance there is some property called contain. Yeah, so now you should be seeing this. Okay, it's actually twice. So it is happening because it is repeating itself to fill the entire space. So there is a property to control this. It is called background repeat, and you can specify it as no repeat. Once you do that, it will just come once, and it is not exactly placed in center. So what we can do about that is we can position it, say for instance center from top. Yeah, so it is centered. Also it doesn't look a bit appealing since it does not cover the entire box. So there is another property called as background, the same thing, background size, and we can give it as cover. So now it will nicely fit the entire space. It will do the scaling for us and it should look good. Yeah, that's mostly I guess. Yeah, I just missed another property about position. You won't be seeing that what is this navigation once you scroll down. So usually they were doing some JavaScript properties for that, but now we could control it from CSS itself. All you have to do is you just have to mark it as display sticky. So I'll just select that navbar and mark the display to be sticky, and I'll position it from top 0 pixel. So now what you could see is sorry, actually it is position sticky. Yeah, now once you scroll down you will be seeing it logged into the position. Yeah, that's most of it, I guess, guys. Do let me know if you need anything else. I'll just try to post more videos often. And it actually took 50 minutes, I guess. So if you are watching all along till this part, I would say you are dedicated towards learning web development. And since patience is everything in web development, I would say you're doing pretty good job, and you should be successful once you complete all these learning process. So just stay on track, try to update yourself on regular basis. Surely you'll find yourself with a pretty decent job. So best of luck for that. I'll see you in next video. I think we have seen all those colorful parts right now, and from next video I think it is going to be a bit of coding. It is going to be JavaScript, npm, webpack, all the coding part. So brace yourself. See you then. Bye guys.